ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hi there, it's PK from the new podcast Politics Now. Sam Hawley will be with you in a second for ABC News Daily, but I just want to tell you about my new podcast Politics Now. As news breaks, we'll bring you the latest analysis in your feed. It's called Politics Now and you can find us on the ABC Listen app.
Within hours of its release, it became one of the most downloaded apps in the world. DeepSeek is an AI tool taking on ChatGPT. But should we be wary of it? Today, tech reporter Ange Lavoipierre on why the government's banned it on its devices and whether the rest of us should avoid it too. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. DeepSeek, it took the world completely by storm a few weeks back, but just in case some people haven't heard of it, just explain briefly what it is again.
DeepSeek, on the face of things, is the new Chinese chatbot. Works more or less like any other chatbot that you've ever interacted with, something like ChatGPT, for example. But obviously, it's much more than that, or it wouldn't have wiped almost $1 trillion off tech stocks on the day it hit the news. The reason it did that is because it was made supposedly on much less money, on a bit of a shoestring budget, and yet it is going toe-to-toe with the leading US-based AI models. So it did trigger this global freakout, and there is some question as to whether or not it was made quite as cheaply and quickly as the company DeepSeek says it was, but the central facts still hold, which is it's kind of broken the model for what we thought it took to make world-leading AI.
Yeah, all right. So this is China's version, essentially, of ChatGPT, and it's been downloaded and a lot of times around the world. It's simply gone off, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Have you had a play with it?
I have, actually.
Yeah.
I've done so carefully. I just want to assure everyone, given everything we're about to talk about. And it works more or less how you would expect. It feels a lot like using ChatGPT, if you're used to that at all, which makes sense because according to OpenAI, ChatGPT's maker, they sort of cribbed some of their work in order to make it. So, yeah, it does feel a lot like any other chatbot to use. Maybe it's a little bit easier to jailbreak or, to trick it, to try and get it to say things that it shouldn't say. Other independent researchers have found this too. For example, finding that, it's easier to get it to give out instructions on anything from sort of self-harm to building a weapon. It's rocketed to the top of the charts. It's had millions of downloads, been hovering around number one on the App Store charts, both Google and Apple, in lots of countries, including in Australia.
But the thing is, Ange, very soon after it became super popular here in Australia and everywhere else, of course, the Science Minister, Ed Husic, became one of the first politicians in the world to raise concerns about it.
Because I think there are a lot of questions that will need to be answered in time around quality, around consumer preferences, around data and privacy management and what that all means.
What's he worried about exactly?
Well, he's worried about data and privacy management. He says there's unanswered questions there. Translation, he's worried that the data that we agreed to hand over to DeepSeek when we sign up, and perhaps the data that we give that app when we ask it questions or ask it to do jobs for us, that's not entirely secure.
He raised the concerns first of all, but then about a week later, the government straight out banned the app from being installed on government devices. So what was the justification for that?
I mean, we should all be worried about our data privacy, really. Believe me, I am. But there are special concerns, obviously, when you've got it on government devices, which have all kinds of sensitive information on them. Now, that ban that they brought in was only for government bodies, Australia Post, ABC, basically those sort of corporate bodies were to be exempt. That said, ABC, Australia Post and NBN, for example, they've all banned the app of their own accord. Other countries have followed Australia down this path. There are similar bans in Taiwan, in Italy, the US state of Texas. South Korean intelligence agencies have also raised similar concerns. So we're really not the only ones flagging the risks here.
Yeah, sure. Okay, and as you mentioned, the ABC has banned it as well, so we can't go on our computers here and have a look at DeepSeek. Anyway, let's look then at the risks that DeepSeek could pose. At the heart of it, Ange, isn't it the fact that really it's owned by a Chinese company? You know, the government here, it banned TikTok on government devices a few years back. That's a Chinese-owned company. It all comes down, does it, to the fact that we don't trust Beijing?
I think that's part of it, but it is more complicated than that. The Home Affairs Minister, Tony Burke, did say that the Australian government is, quote, country agnostic when it comes to making these kinds of decisions. But we do need to say that there's a special concern here with China. And the reason is because China has a national security law, which means that Chinese companies do have to hand over the data on their servers if they're asked to do so. Now, DeepSeek is a private company, no apparent state backing there, but it's a different relationship that companies have with their government in China. So as we remember with TikTok, and of course TikTok was banned on government devices too some time ago, that is the issue.
All right. And explain for me now then, how is the information, the data that we've been speaking about, actually collected by DeepSeek?
This is the rest of the picture, I suppose. So it's what happens to our data once it is shared with the app. And it's not just whether the Chinese government might ask for it, right? So in the first place, we're just handing over all kinds of sensitive data with any chatbot, whether it's DeepSeek or ChatGPT, depending, of course, on how we're using it. But it can feel very intimate and very private, right, when you're interacting with one of these models. But in fact, whatever data you put in there, proprietary data, maybe, you know, you're using it for work, maybe you're in a privacy-sensitive job, you know, medicine or law or something like that, you're handing it over to another company. But beyond that, I've been speaking to some analysts who have been looking at the particulars of DeepSeek, and they have a lot of concerns. Basically, DeepSeek collects an awful lot of data about the user's device. So say you've downloaded DeepSeek to your smartphone. One property of the app is that it tracks the device's name. And for many devices, that defaults to the customer's name, the user's name, your name, followed by the device type. So that kind of data is being collected. Combine that with what you're sort of plugging into the app, and then data gathered from advertising companies, sort of the ad tech ecosystem. It could be used to de-anonymize users of the DeepSeek app. That's the concern, at least anyway. There's unencrypted data transmission. So the app does transmit sensitive data over the internet without encryption. That makes it vulnerable to interception and manipulation. There's insecure data storage. This is all analysis from a cybersecurity analysis firm called Now Secure, and they told me that it's much less secure in these respects than its US competitors. It found none of those same security issues in ChatGPT, for example. And their take was that DeepSeek's security flaws are severe.
Okay, so then that gets you thinking about the millions of Australians that have actually downloaded the app already, not just the government workers that have been banned from using it. Should they at this point be a bit worried about it?
Potentially, and some cybersecurity analysts, CyberCX, for example, they've called for the government to extend its ban to critical infrastructure providers and the wider business community. So power providers, major health systems organisations, transport providers, so on. There are already special rules that apply to those kinds of organisations. They have to have extra cybersecurity measures in place, follow special rules, and maybe that should be the case here as well. At least that's what CyberCX is arguing. But in terms of, how the rest of us should be thinking about it, it's all about how you use it, I think. There are obviously special risks for businesses and governments and, those professions that I mentioned with confidentiality obligations. But there does seem to be a risk for private citizens too. If you wouldn't be comfortable publishing it on a blog, for example, or, a Facebook post, or putting it in an email to an external company or to a stranger, then maybe you shouldn't be typing it into DeepSeek or ChatGPT for that matter. The government special envoy for cybersecurity, Andrew Charlton, has been specific about this. He said that people should be vigilant when they use this app.
So we'd encourage anybody who's using generative AI. It's a wonderful tool, very helpful for many applications in our lives. But you need to be aware that the information that you upload may not be private. So our advice is that we wouldn't want people to upload anything that they wouldn't want to ultimately become public.
And also, and this really goes for any chatbots, but don't rely on the accuracy of the information that's provided.
So just briefly to clarify, DeepSeek does pose a greater risk than another chatbot like ChatGPT, for instance, when it comes to our data.
It does seem to have weaker protections there. That's what analysts are telling me, yeah.
Now, just tell me about China. How has it responded to Australia's move to ban DeepSeek from government devices?
Look, they're not fans, as you can imagine. It's not their favourite thing that we've done lately. They've described it as a politicisation of economic, trade and technological issues. They deny that the app is being used to collect data. They say that the Chinese government has never and will never require enterprises or individuals to illegally collect or store data. Now, of course, some tricky wording there. Of course, it is legal for them to ask for certain kinds of data, but that's their position.
The thing is, Ange, I guess, with all this sort of technology, the concerns are normally raised after the fact. The horse has already bolted, the app is out there, millions of people have downloaded it, they like it. So do we need to get to a point where we're more proactive, that we actually put blocks on perhaps tech coming out of China altogether? Is that going too far?
It's so hard, right, when tech moves this fast and there are no international borders on the internet. Contemplating a blanket ban, a sort of preemptive measure that you're describing there, it would be pretty unprecedented. It would be pretty explosive, I think, in terms of our relationship with China, Australia's relationship. And I think, honestly, it would be pretty upsetting to a lot of the business sector because we are, for better or worse, really enmeshed there. And there are a lot of people in the business community, in the private sector, who want to use this emerging tech. Yeah. We talk a lot about DeepSeek, but there are other chatbot models of a similar level that have emerged just in the time since we've been talking about DeepSeek. Yeah. So that's how fast it's moving. There aren't enough column inches or minutes of, airtime to cover the pace of change in terms of tech coming out of China. So we'd be locking ourselves off from the good as well as the bad. Yes. Look, we may see more restrictions, we may see bans or, perhaps just advice change, particularly to the business community and some of that critical infrastructure I mentioned earlier. But I think that policy in this space can't help but be reactive.
Well, of course, many people have downloaded, as we mentioned, the DeepSeek app. And, some people will really like it. They won't have any desire to delete it, and that's fine for them too. But what should they be considering every time they go onto it, do you think?
Look, just be wary. We agree to so much when we tick that little terms and services box every time we download any new app, and that goes for DeepSeek too. Just know what we've told you today, I suppose, that there are extra risks attached here and you may choose to proceed anyway. You may go, that doesn't really worry me, I don't mind, I'm not putting anything in there that doesn't bother me. And I think a lot of people feel as if they're so exposed in a privacy sense anyway that what's one more app? But you should know that these are the risks and you should certainly be careful about what you type into that little window.
Ange Lavoipierre is the ABC's tech reporter. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed, Cara Jensen-McKinnon and Sam Dunn. Audio production by Adair Shepherd. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.